Hello and welcome to the Statesman Talk. On this episode, we are talking about the uneasy calm in Nepal, why the crisis boiled over, the path ahead, and the implications for India. We're joined by Manjeev Puri, former Indian ambassador to Nepal, whose years in Kathmandu and global diplomatic expertise make him a leading expert on Nepal's politics and India's regional ties. Ambassador Puri, thanks so much for joining us here on Statesman Talk.
Thank you, Ananya. Particularly happy to be on something which is anchored by the Statesman. I'm a Delhiite. I've grown up on you guys and watching the building other than reading it. Fantastic. Please go ahead.
That's a lovely note to start on, sir. Let me begin by asking you, were you surprised that the Gen Z protests in Nepal that started over a social media ban quickly turned into a movement against corruption and nepotism?
If you asked me that it turned into a protest against corruption and nepotism, the answer is no. If the subtext of your question was that why did it turn violent, that's a different matter altogether. So let me take a minute and answer. Look, I have little doubt in my mind that in Nepal, there is a great deal of frustration among the youth. No jobs, difficult economic times. They haven't really recovered after COVID. The only thing available to young people is migrate, work outside, etc. And then those who are left behind, they have this sense of, nothing is going up. Then you had a government which had two-thirds majority, unresponsive almost by definition, i.e., institutional abilities to ring the bell became very less. And you have all those Nepo kids and all those business. After all, the same three people were at the helm of affairs in Nepal for the last 10, 12 years, etc. There's another end. Nepal is quite a changed society from India. It's been exposed to globalization in a very intense sort of manner over the last 20, 30 years. 20-25% of the population is overseas and not in India, Southeast Asia, Australia, Europe, the Gulf, Americas. So, this understanding is become quite vibrant. They also have a large number of global NGOs, the church, etc. All this happened after the Maoist insurgency. So let me say it's a society with a degree of activism. Young people who are active, they are familiar with social media, they know all. Now, if I turn to the question of, am I surprised that it turned violent? I was. Because it meant to me a very simple thing that the government, perhaps in its hubris and secondly in its arrogance, did something which is not very common in Nepal. After all, when the monarchy was removed, also there was no real violence in that sense of the term, huge number. Did they underestimate the kind of turnout that would happen? It would appear so. Did they then take a very, no need to have taken such a tough stance, calling people anti-national, saying we'll set you right, how dare you protest, and then asking the police to open fire and kill 20, 30 people, young people, hospitals lined with the injured, visible ideas, which allowed, let me say, it frustrated the people, it pulled up pent-up anger, and then I have little doubt that miscreants and others took advantage of the situation, but things went out of hand. Badly handled, without any doubt at all. Again, the two words I use is hubris, because you're in power, you've been there, you've handled everything, etc. And arrogance, that you were very tough with people who believe that Nepal is their country. And then another little point which is important. For all that we talk about, Nepal has a degree of homogeneity divided in basically two sets of people, the Pahadis and the Janjatis and the people from Madhya. If this had happened in the southern part, people would have said very sad, very bad. But it happened in the heartland. This is my country. How dare you do this? You are my elected representative. You are from my community. You did this for me. There will be retribution. And then it is my belief again, after all, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh are not unknown to people. Social media is not. The army also sees them. The chief possibly looked at it and said, here's a playbook from Sri Lanka. Let there be a little bit of venting. And then look at this. The very next day, they made an appeal for calm. Even the Gen Z leaders made. And that what is it that we see on the third day? The so-called protesters are out on the streets cleaning the streets. You're right. The calm is uneasy because a political vacuum has been created. But I have little doubt in my mind that the government in power, particularly Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli, hubris, arrogance, instead of handling the matter and showing a degree of responsibility, responsiveness rather. It was the same thing. We know everything. We are elected. We are here for 5 years. Don't tell us what is the right thing to do. So, saw the result in a small place where there is a kind of homogeneity in society.
Right. If I were to ask you, what do you see as the real tipping point that led to those deadly clashes? What would it be?
It was that social media ban. That's the tipping point. Underlying factors are unemployment, frustration in general, unresponsive government. But tipping points are important by themselves. You did the one thing that the people had to vent. They vented their anger on that.
Yeah.
They use social media for small things like small livelihoods, etc. You attacked them, in a sense, the last bastion. And then you made statements, how dare you guys, you are no good, you are anti-national, you are doing this, that, and the other. It allowed mobilization. When people came on the streets, they became, let me say, targets for miscreants to take advantage. And then, as an administration, you need to be quite aware that situations can get mishandled. And it is your responsibility to be prepared for even a situation going out of hand and being mishandled. You need to be that much more mature because you are in power. Instead of saying, these guys went on the rampage, well, what can I say about it? This is the entire thing, which is why I use these two words that, you know, uh, there was too much power in that sense. Two-thirds majority, you were distant. You said, we've seen protests in the past. We led the protests against the king. We'll see what happens. You saw what happened.
Yes, you use that phrase, you need to be mature when you're in power. Uh, Now, with Oli out and an interim government under Sushila Karki in place, what's your take on whether, on how this goes forward, on the challenges that she's going to face, and the fact that she will have to rebuild trust with the youth who toppled the old regime?
So, Ananya, I think the trust is the least bit of the problem. The problem is that you have destroyed infrastructure.
Mhm.
Change is very, I wouldn't say easy, but streets have brought about the change. Do they really bring about a change in the system mentality? The global experience is not so. You can see Arab Spring, you can see Ferdinand Marcos and his son, now the president of Philippines, etc., etc. I'm not saying that will happen again, but it remains the same society in various ways. The change, in a sense, is the people there. Have they gone? I don't know. I see Mr. Oli making statements. Mr. Dioba is supposed to be in negotiations. Baburam Bhattarai and Prachand are making statements. So Nepal is an intensely political kind of society, and they are the same society, the same Khas Arya, the Brahmins and the Kshatris, the Pahadis, negotiating with each other. But what do I believe? Uh, Chief Justice Sushila Karki has a personal reputation which is high on integrity, standing up for rights of people. After all, when she was Chief Justice, the politicians tried to impeach her. So, she has a very strong personality, a strong individual. The kind of people she's appointed today are what you call techno bureaucratic kind of people, which is fine. The army, at least till now, has said, we are there at the back. We're a backbone, but we're not coming in front, which also is a good sign that, we are there, but, take political processes forward. Now, Nepal is a country following the monarchy not being there, where there is intense amount of political awareness. And that too has something to do with Western ideas, etc. It's an empowered society, very different from our state of, and therefore this awareness, etc. Now, can you get Gen Z leaders in? I don't know. You have to find some way of letting them in into the process, thinking about it, etc. At the same time, you need to do governance, which is very easy that I demand change, but when it comes to your buildings, the major buildings of the government, they've been torched. Believe me, something very interesting. When the mobs went to torch the building, they told all the people to come out and they torched the building. Can you imagine there are no deaths as a result of torching the
Yes.
building? This is a this is the kind of society that it is. It's a nice society on one way, but it's an excitable, empowered, and aware society. So somewhat different from the way we are in a large, huge, heterogeneous society, diverse society, which is India. But now it comes the real things. It's the political challenge is one side of the story. Conducting the elections is another side.
Yes.
But infrastructure damage,
Hmm.
Nepal is not a booming economy. There's no great resource which you can pump for money. Where does the money come from? And people's aspirations, now they say we've got our own government. Now, please, can I have Switzerland and Nepal? It doesn't work like that. It's a very tough challenge. And so therefore it's not just the political challenge, but somehow or the other, making people feel that look, we're trying to do what we can, assuage your requirements, but we don't have the resources to be able to do it. It isn't easy, and even international aid and all can't substitute for what a country has to do by itself. It's a very, very tough time for them. Uh, Starting points of trying to give some political stability is easier, but to be able to maintain it, run the gauntlet of elections, do infrastructure build up, reconstruct, it's a very, very tough call.
Uh, Master Puri, just an aside, your love for Nepal and its people shows in your answers actually, because it just shows through what you're saying.
It
Uh,
is.
we were talking about the economy. Do you think there could be a silver lining in the sense that there could be reforms somewhere down the line?
So, Ananya, when we talk about reforms, we tend to again conflate this with a country like India. Huge public sector, this, that. Nepal doesn't have it. It doesn't. I mean, it's a private sector run kind of place. It's an economy with inherent limitations. The Nepalese for 200 years have been talking about being a yam between India and China. And the growth of India and China, they say, oh, wow, we'll be the Switzerland of the world. No, no. Switzerland is because it is Switzerland, because the countries around it are the kind that are. Even if both India and China are growing, there are a whole lot of issues there. It's a very tough economy to work in. It isn't difficult. You don't have any natural resource. The one resource you have is hydropower. For 20 years, you delayed it because you thought India would make more money than you would make. Now they've started working on hydropower. But is it easy? Can you immediately disburse large amounts? No. The biggest project, Arun 3 of India, is about what, 50-60% done. It will take several years. When it will be done, it will be a sea change. So, they have to find ways. It isn't for nothing that a quarter of your population is working outside. Yes, you're getting a lot of remittances. It changed your mindset. But do you really have that infrastructure to be and what kind of a great economy are you going to be? What are you going to be able to do?
Hmm.
Uh, you neither, you're landlocked. There's all these things. So it's a very tough call. But resilience is, of course, another word for the Nepalese. They have survived hundred years plus, 500 years, in fact, as they say. They nestled in the Himalayas. They managed. They didn't become Switzerland, but that's okay. They managed to have independence. They managed to have their own country, and so on. So, yeah, let's see. Resilience is a very big word. It's a tough word too.
And Mr. Puri, what should Delhi watch out now for in the coming months to ensure that the interim period doesn't veer toward external influences like China?
So, Ananya, first thing I want to tell you is, we are without, we here keep talking about Chinese influence. Well, of course it is there. There's no doubt that the exposure to Western ideas, etc., post the Maoist insurgency has changed Nepal tremendously. And in comparison to India, the mindset of the people has, opened itself up very, very in a huge, massive manner. What do we have to? What is our interest? Our interest is a degree of stability in Nepal. Our interest is people to people contact. Our interest is things go on. The politicians, whoever is chosen, you think those people don't know India? I don't want to get into belaboring and saying that, oh, these are all Indian friends. No, no, no. One of the most important things in Nepal is not to overplay this India card because, the nature of Nepal is you had the high Himalayas on the other side. The whole thing over 200 years, Prithvi Narayan Shah onward, is yes, we look like you, eat like you, have the same food, etc. We have roti, beti ka rishta, but we are Nepali, we are not Indian.
Hmm.
And this differentiation is very important. We in India tend to very easily say, Hamare jaise hain. But they make a very big fetish of this. And politically, this identity politics is the most important. So we need to be, in my opinion, and we've done very right. We've asked for stability, etc., said it's a call. The prime minister has said, well, democracy has shown itself, whatever it is, that's okay. But basically, if they ask for any kind of advice, etc., be there to give it. After all, what is India's greatest asset? It's the fact that we had multi-party democracy from the get-go. We have maintained it, and nobody, despite all our challenges, nobody says India is not an absolute shining example of democracy. We have our own warts. But look at our size and the fact that, yes, we have electoral politics, we have all our sides, but we are that lovely now. Nepal's democracy owes everything to India in that sense. We are the ones who, the Communist Party was set up in India, Nepali Congress was set up in India. So that's the nature of history. But let's forget history. That's a very long time. We should be willing to do whatever they ask for, but let them play their own game. And I'm glad that will happen. Uh, these ideas of influence from outside, yes, you are aware of it. Be cognizant, but don't overplay them. For me, the greatest danger is that anger in Nepal should be for the Nepalese to find a solution and not do the default position, which is some, and there are inimical forces which take advantage of the thing because it's the easiest thing to do. Turn it around to India. Our own media, if you go around and look at what has happened. Were they received very well in Nepal? No, they weren't. Why? Because they keep looking at Nepal from an India lens. But Nepal is Nepal. And that's something which is very important to understand. Uh, should I use the word, they are a member of the Committee of Nations. And so while in the Ministry of External Affairs, we always say equal, respect, this, that, and the other, in a great sense of the term, we need to inculcate that even at the level of the people, the media, etc. Because believe me, they notice, they see. We may think it's very normal, but their perspectives on all this is yes, we like the same food and the same sarees and so on and so forth. But are you not respecting me for being myself? That's important.
Very, very interesting point. Very interesting point, Master Puri. We've seen youth-led uprisings topple governments in Bangladesh and Sri Lanka as well recently. How similar do you see Nepal's situation to those uprisings?
So look, these have happened not only here. I mentioned to you the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos. It happened in the middle of Africa, in large parts of Latin America. So these things do happen. Social media, in fact, better connectivity has meant you can mobilize people in large numbers very quickly. It happens. Now, talking about the two countries that you mentioned, I think in some senses, if we are trying to find some kind of a parallel, the Sri Lankan case is somewhat there. There you had a government which was it was a president, so he was elected and said, all's good. There was rapacious corruption and talked about in the public, the same as the case with Nepal, unresponsive government, again, economy dependent upon remittances and so on and so forth. And again, if you notice, the army took the same kind of play route, went for a day or two, jump on the beds, and then a normal political process. There have been a presidential election, prime minister, people who may not have got elected earlier, but who were very much part of the process. And that's what happened. Bangladesh is a bit different, quite different. There are all those sectarian issues. There are issues of involvement from outside and so on and so forth. And then you had somebody who had been in power for such a long time. In Sri Lanka, Gotabaya was only recently elected. His brother may have been elected earlier. And in Nepal, nobody was, these people had been properly elected. Nobody said the election was rigged or anything of that kind. It's just that because they formed a grand coalition, the two largest parties came together, then there was no way of even ringing the bell in the parliament. So parliamentary democracy also has some demands. It's a very interesting demand. Sometimes we always say, opposition is disruptive, this, that, but the fact is it's a release valve. And it allows people to think that their views are being vented and so on and so forth. And the government has to have some degree of listening in to all of this. When we look at Britain, it's very interestingly divided. The House of Commons has two parallel benches, the Treasury and the opposition. And you see the two chaps getting up asking questions. We may not want that. But look at even the US. Despite Mr. Trump and his overwhelming sort of capture of the Republican Party, every time you want a bill passed, there is need for some kind of bipartisan consensus. At least some Democrats should come over, or every single Republican to the T must vote. So these are important elements. This is the beauty of democracy, that there is some degree of space for the other guys, at least institutionally.
Hmm.
When the two largest come together, frankly, you have to be Germany to be able to accept that grand coalitions are fine. In Nepal, again, I would say even that was fine. But in the end, on an emotive or a subject that touched you, totally impervious kind of behavior stemming from these two words, which are not good words, shouldn't be used, hubris and arrogance.
Hmm.
You tip the thing over. And because it's a small country, Kathmandu has 20% of the population, it happened right on your doorstep.
Yes, at our doorstep. In fact, uh, as India, as Nepal's closest neighbor with open borders and deep ties, what risks does this instability pose to our security or economy right now?
Look, we have to be extremely careful on our border that miscreants and others don't come in. Already there have been reports of some jailbreaks and some fellow. But I believe very, very, very much that our systems are pretty robust and pretty resilient. We know what is happening. And on our border security, I don't want to say that there's any great threat. We should be aware, we should be cognizant, the forces should be in a degree of alert, but we should not be such that we restrict people to people ties,
Hmm.
because that is our greatest security as far as Nepal is concerned. Other than that, look, they, what happens in Nepal, we come to know instantly. Their own people are telephoning you, calling you, talking to you. You have so many friends there, etc. Everybody knows what is going on there in Nepal. In some senses, it's democracy with transparency. Now, you may not like it. There's another element. You know, deep state, other. Yes, these things happen. In small countries, they are always vulnerable. And we have our own, we need to have our own system, just as I'm sure others have their own system.
Hmm.
But if political processes play out, remember, here is a country where through the street you had a 150-year-old democracy having to say thank you. And then look at this. The former king moved into a house in Kathmandu, didn't flee Kathmandu, is okay there. He goes out in the outside. Sometimes he does rallies. They haven't been very successful, but
Hmm.
people say that's okay, that's fine. It's a society which is somewhat unique and peculiar. It's a society which is active, which is very aware of what is happening. Uh, they also get angry, no doubt about that, but they also have a degree of being able to accept that somebody else has a different view.
Interesting take, sir. Finally, I want to ask you one question on the Gen Z movement in Nepal using platforms like Discord to coordinate after the social media blackout. Turning into, as people say, chat room parliament. In your view, how has digital empowerment changed the game for youth activism in democracies like Nepal, and what risks does that pose for governments?
So, Ananya, has that not happened anywhere? Why is the United States not banning TikTok? We banned it. President Trump doesn't want to ban it because he says TikTok is the one which resulted in his coming to power.
Hmm.
So social media, not just social media, this interconnectivity, etc., and it becoming so cheap to get across free virtually is something that all governments have to be very aware of. All governments worldwide, developing doesn't matter. In our societies, more so, because our governments are the way they are. They are sort of, I get elected, thank you very much. It's 5 years, I'll see you after that. The larger the country, the more that is the case. Why not? Electioneering is not cheap. Even in Nepal, if you see, the political parties are saying, don't dissolve the parliament. Why? Because I may have to contest again. So, we all know that. We know that. But empowerment is both a positivity. If your products are selling, you are very happy. If you are winning elections because of how did Mr. Oli win the election in the first instance? By whipping up an anti-India hysteria following the blockade. Did social media not play a role? It did. But on the other hand, when it becomes critical of you, you start finding fault. So we all as governments need to be very mindful. It's got both sides. You can use it to your advantage if till such time the going is good. When
Hmm.
it turns the other way around, it's pretty sharpened sword because it gets people riled up and people at least mobilized. The rest, again, you have to handle. So, in some senses, no news was always good news. I'm afraid now it's more news and a hell of a lot of news. And some of the news could be fake, some of the news could be contrived, but that's par for the course. What can we do about it? This genie is out of the bottle.
Ambassador Puri, thanks so much for joining us on Statesman Talk. Well, lovely talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ananya. All the best. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye, sir.